Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Mayor Hoppick, I believe that you were wanting to do the city's roll call. And
yes, I'd like to.
That microphone has its switch.
I know, it's on.
Yeah, I'd like to call to order the joint city-county meeting. I would first of all like to ask the city clerk if confirmation that under the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will have roll call.
Mayor Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Fran, Commissioner Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Thank you.
I will call to order the Saline County Board of Commissioners special meeting for the TUSA Consulting Services. And our clerk is not here today. Hannah will serve as that. They're getting ready for the election. So Hannah, if you'd call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Shadwick.
Here.
Commissioner Sparks.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
And Commissioner Vidrickson.
Here.
Okay. I am going to open this discussion. First off, thank you both to Saline County and the City of Salina for your willingness to come together in regards to being able to provide the information regarding the request for proposals and the recommendations that have been set forth by our consulting company, TUSA. I want to kind of give everybody a little bit of history and background as to how we have actually gotten to this point, because it seems like we have been doing this for quite a while. But just to kind of just go back in history to give us the story here, we actually started this process a long time ago. But most recently, in January of 2019, we had briefed both governing bodies in regards to potential cost estimates of upgrading our current radio infrastructure to a 700 or 800 megahertz spectrum. Our 911 advisory committee at that time had done quite a bit of due diligence to find some cost-saving measures based on the estimated prices that have been given to us by our consulting company, TUSA. And at that point in time is when the committee began working with TUSA to develop a request for proposals. The request for proposal was sent out on November the 1st, and then a mandatory pre-bid conference was held on November the 20th, which was very well attended by several different vendors and subcontractors. All proposals were due back on January 16th of 2020, and we received a total of 4 proposals from 2 companies, L3Harris and Motorola. At that point in time, we had selected a small group of individuals from our 911 Advisory Council as well as TUSA Consulting to review the proposals. We had Sheriff Solden, Chief Abker, Wayne Pruitt, Michelle Barkley, and myself that volunteered our time to review all the proposals along with TUSA. And we're talking proposals, they're 3,000 pages long. It's quite a bit of reading that we all got to do. We did evaluate and grade each of the proposals for their technical compliance first. Pricing was evaluated and graded by TUSA, but only after we had determined that the proposals had been vetted enough to ensure that they had met all of the technical compliance issues. On February the 13th, our internal group did meet with TUSA to review the proposals and our evaluation and grading of each. Our scores were all averaged and multipliers added based on technical compliance and pricing. And Dean from TUSA can go into a little bit of that later. Through our evaluation of the proposals, we did recommend to the rest of the 911 committee that we wanted to have each one of the vendors come and actually do oral presentations. We felt that there was some clarifications and some questions that we all had, and so we brought both L3Harris and Motorola to the table in an in-person interview / presentation. Those presentations were held on March the 4th and March the 5th. And then that's when we started experiencing a lot of the stuff with COVID. So we definitely still kept working on the project. It just kind of slowed down some of our processes. But we did meet back on the 26th of May, the 911 committee, so we could further discuss the proposals and the evaluation and the grading that came back from that. We did direct TUSA to provide us a written report on the evaluation process and as well as their recommendation moving forward. So our meeting today is for TUSA to present their recommendation, for us to have some discussion and provide any answers to the questions that you may have, and ultimately gather your thoughts on moving forward. So Mike, am I missing anything? Do you have anything that you want to add?
Not at this point. I think there will be plenty of discussion to be had.
Okay. I will introduce Dean Hart from TUSA Consulting. He has been one of our main project managers on this, for him to go through the actual evaluation of the request for proposals and then ultimately their recommendation.
I'm gonna remove this just so I can talk, so. Just to kind of go through our scoring summary. I'm Dean Hart, I'm out of the Kansas City area. The consultants that have been working on this project are out of the Kansas City area. We've done several other jobs, McPherson County, Riley County, Miami County, or Ford County, to name a few, Johnson County. So we've been doing work all over the state of Kansas. And looking at the scoring summary, we look heavily at the technical proposal and typically will grade about 500 different points within the technical proposal to ensure compliance. As Hannah talked about, we had the L3 Harris standalone, we had the Motorola standalone, and we had the Motorola alternate. We did not consider the L3 Harris alternate because it didn't meet coverage requirements in the RFP. So we did not even look at the cost of that, because if it's not technically compliant, we kind of have the philosophy to our customers, is the cost really even relevant at that point? So we graded those three proposals. We look at the technical score and we take a 0.7 multiplier to come up with the score after we evaluated these roughly 500 points. We came to the conclusion that we then opened the cost of the three, the L3 Harris standalone, the Motorola standalone, the Motorola alternate, and we effectively grade the price and we evaluate a like for like on the different pieces. And then we take that score and take a 0.3 multiplier, and you ultimately come up with the final score. Rarely do we ever give scores this tight. So the vendors really did a good job in the proposals that we scored and evaluated. And it really kind of made it a challenge of what should the recommendation be. So we took it to the oral presentation. They were pretty tight in that too. They both did a good job in presenting what they felt was their solution for Saline County and the city of Salina. So after it was all said and done, we really came up to the conclusion we should go into a dual negotiation with the vendors on their proposals, and at the end of the day, at that point, price would matter. So if the technical proposals are good, they're compliant, at this point it's all about cost. Now, based on the cost, if you look at page 4, we lay out costs by the infrastructure, the services to put in that infrastructure, the subscribers, and the operating costs over the 15-year period. And you can see the respective costs in there. Obviously, the Harris standalone and the Motorola alternate are probably the lowest cost. The Motorola standalone was 5 distinct sites, so it was a little pricey and compared to the other two. When you look at the initial cost to implement the systems, you see Harris is at 10.1, Motorola's at 11.6. That, in my mind, is not the final price. That's the starting of the negotiation price. They may come down, they may go up. We don't know. That's why we negotiate. Our hopes are always that negotiation brings the price down, or we get more services at a lower or the same cost. So at this point, that's kind of given you a starting point from a budgetary perspective to consider, but we're really just looking to go into negotiations and come back at a later point to this body with a final contract and a final recommended price. So, I mean, that's the high levels of this. I'd gladly answer any questions from the commissioners or city council at this point.
I guess I have just one question. I mean, I noticed that the Motorola alternate, the one that's compatible with the state system, are there some inherent advantages to being fully integrated with the state system as opposed to having a standalone system?
So the answer is yes. Motorola is providing 3 sites in that alternate, and then they take advantage of the other state sites that are surround Saline County. Interoperability, it would be direct interoperability. I don't want to sit there and say Harris can't provide it. They're providing a P25 system. They can easily program the state template in those radios, and you can have interoperability. It's just not as seamless as being a part of the state system. There's a ISSI component that Harris can put in between their cores and the state cores to make that more seamless. The state's not always cooperative on that. The state says we'll do it, but as long as somebody else pays for it. And that typically becomes a very big added cost into this. We can obviously have that discussion and look at what that final cost may be from both vendors as part of negotiations, just to be able to bring that information to you at a later date on final cost.
But that's something that would be included in the final costs and that final presentation. We should know all of, how it's, obviously how it's going to interact, but more important is who's, also going to assume that cost. And then I guess my follow-up to that would be, do you see any long-term advantages to our being a part of the state system as technology changes and upgrades happen? The fact that the state would be essentially doing a lot of those upgrades and enhancements or whatever? Or is that something that provides much of an advantage at all?
So in my opinion, the state's a little bit behind the curve, just because of the sheer cost that they had to update all their sites and all their other systems, like Harvey County, Ford County, Miami County, Leavenworth County. There's several decent-sized counties on the state network. They're not phase 2. This portion of the system, Motorola or Harris, can be phase 2. If the state wants to take advantage of that technology, their radio should be phase 2 coming into here, so they'll pull you back. They stay with you. Their cores and everything, they're in what's called an SUA, or System Upgrade Assurance. So they do software updates to their cores located in your county and also near Wichita. And so their IT portion of their system is modern. Their RF infrastructure is modern, but they haven't moved to the next level of technology. They're slow to adopt, I'm gonna call new technologies like GPS or other things that are available in P25. So you gotta have, as part of the state, you'd have influence instead of direct control to change that. If that answers your question.
I think so, thank you.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. When does the phase 2 start? This is reference to phase 1 and phase 2. Are these?
So this process in our process is phase 2. Phase 1 was the needs assessment that we presented to you into this body. Phase 2 is the procurement process that we're currently in at this point.
All right, when you,
I think I'm going the same place you are, because I thought that there was some sort of technology upgrade in the phase two system.
on top of page 3, under the Motorola solutions joining the state system, under the cons, it says offers only phase 1 due to state system technical limitations.
Okay,
Then
so
there's a
we're,
reference to phase 2. Can you
we got too many phases in the different portions of this, yes, sir. So when I say phase 1 and P25, that means I have one talk path per channel. So for every frequency I license, I can put one talk path and talk on it. In phase 2, or TDMA, for every one channel that I license, I can have 2 talk paths of efficiency. So I've effectively doubled my capacity by going to P25 phase 2 versus P25 phase 1.
And the state is not capable of phase 2.
The state is not capable of it. We can sit there and make Saline County and Salina phase 2 as part of it. We're doing that with Miami County. We've done that with some other agencies in the Mars region, which is the bi-state Kansas City region.
So on a practical, everyday basis, how would that affect police operation?
It gives you more capacity at fewer frequencies. It really would have no impact on your local. Where the impact would be is if you had some event come into Saline County or Salina that the state was using the RF infrastructure that you're going to build, they would pull it back to phase 1 because they don't have phase 1 radios, or phase 2 radios, excuse me. It's not to say they can't do that, and as part of you building out more infrastructure onto the state network, you could require that of all users. Hey, if you want to use our RF coverage, you got to have a phase 2 radio. And that would be the control of your piece of the network versus control of the rest of the state network.
And one other question, could you give an example of how the interoperability differences between the local and the state system might affect
Sure.
routine?
So if you're connected directly to the state core in Salina, or if he was connected directly to the other state core down near Wichita, as you're moving around in Salina, you're primarily on your network and you're not going to roam. But if you travel to the border parts of the county, you would roam to those sites because they provide the better coverage in that area, and it's seamless. User doesn't have to touch the radio, don't have to think about the radio. They're just going to continue to operate on their day-to-day talk groups and do their job. So if you had a Harris network in the middle of it and you had ISSI and you paid for that, you would effectively have the same capability with that. The state would sit there and control though which talk groups you talk to on the outer edges. So they may not give you the same talk groups you have in your system within the primary means of Saline County and Salina. It would be a subset of those talk groups on that outer border. Does that make sense to you?
Right, so do our officers then lose contact with someone that they need to be talking to local?
No, but they may have to sit there and make a decision in the middle of an event that sits there and says, hey, I'm on my day-to-day talk group and now I've got to go to this ISSI talk group because I've roamed out of my primary coverage territory. So that becomes a user issue potentially in the middle of a situation that we try to avoid. So you try to manage that with your talk group structure, and you try to avoid that so they don't have to do that in day to day, but it is a possibility that they may have to do it.
The life expectancy between these two vendors, how long? Give me a rough idea.
We base our costs on 15 years of total cost of ownership, and we try to advise you on not only what it's going to take to buy the system, but to take care of it for the full 15 years. Typically, you'll get 15 to 20 in that technology life cycle before you're looking at replacing that. On the subscriber side, that's typically a 7 to 10 year life cycle. If you take care of your radios and you do proper maintenance, you're probably going to get a longer time out of them, but that's I'll call it the industry standard.
Do all three of these proposals have identical coverage within the county, and what percent is that?
They were compliant to what we asked for, which I believe was 97%.
96.
Was it 96? Yeah, I got too many numbers in my head. They were compliant to what we asked for, based on their designs within the county, and that included the Harris design or either Motorola design.
And in that 96%, let's say inside the city itself, you get into some structures, were those factored in, hospitals, schools, things like that, or is there more equipment and infrastructure needs to be placed for those?
So the answer is yes to both those questions. In the phase 1 process that we did in the needs assessment here, we said, hey, county, city, give us your critical buildings. And then we put a guarantee on that in the RFP that they would have to provide it. If they could not meet it by their infrastructure, then they potentially would have to put a BDA in. So like your convention center here is a good example. It may need a BDA. How we get to the final determination of that is at the end, when the project's been implemented, we will test it. And we'll test the critical buildings that have been identified by the city and the county. If those buildings do not meet the criteria and it doesn't meet the RFP criteria by the vendor's on the hook to provide that in-building coverage. If it exceeds the 20 dB requirement or whatever the requirement is, then it gives a decision point to the city or county. How critical is this building, and do I want to pay additional money to cover it for day-to-day use? So that could be a hospital, that could be some other building. Those are determined as part of the testing criteria in the RFP.
Just to expand on that just a little bit, Commissioner, we said too, as far as the coverage in the RFP, we did specifically also say that coverage also had to be that 96% outside of our response areas in Saline County. Actually, 5 of our 6 fire districts all have primary response capability or primary responsibilities for response outside of Saline County. So we had to take that into consideration as well.
Did you map any areas that don't have the coverage?
Yes, so all of the maps and stuff that we did get back from each one of the proposals showed the coverage amounts and where the coverage was at. And that was one of the things that we had actually asked for a little bit more clarification in our oral presentations as well. Because I know that Chief Apker had some concerns with one particular area next to, I believe, around the lake area, I think, as far as coverage was concerned, and he was able to ask those questions to clarify better.
So that's all been shared with the rural departments, and you received their input and suggestions?
Yes, sir.
So when you're talking about unwilling to outright accept remedies, is that what we're discussing? Or what is, on the cons, it says under the unwilling to outright accept remedies, it says financial penalties for performance failures.
So we, in our RFP process, we always recommend you put penalties in there. Whether you choose to ever enforce them, we still recommend you put them in there because it really is the final hammer to get the vendor to perform and finish off your system. When we said they took exception to it, they effectively don't like it, so they want to try to negotiate it. I really sit there and say it's non-negotiable and let's move on. So that's kind of my approach to it. We're not sitting there being where we're going to sit there if they go a month over, put them in debt. But it is a tool to get the vendor to perform.
Under the joint state system, on there under cons, it says that they did not guarantee parts or maintenance for 15 years as required by the RFP. Is there any way to put a dollar amount on that? Or at least a ballpark figure?
That would be tough. It's interesting that they said it here because they don't say it in other places. So I kind of get caught off guard by some of that. Was that the legal person for them looking at it at the time and didn't want to sign up? When we see the exceptions or we see the cons of it, we use that as a tool as well to negotiate that. And if that's important and they don't want to meet it, it could be the end of negotiations because of it.
it seems like kind of a loose thread out there that you don't know how that's gonna affect you in a 15-year period.
Correct. Again, that's why we note that, because it becomes a negotiation tool as well. And, you know, I mean, you make an interesting question. Is there a cost to it? Maybe so, because then you sit there and say, give me more spare parts. And I take it as a negotiation tool, give me more spare parts, because you're not guaranteeing me, you're saying you're not guaranteeing me for 15 years, so I want more to be able to manage that and make sure I can still maintain the system.
To follow up on that question, then, if you go to the cost summary and you look at system maintenance, and the alternate, Motorola alternate is by far the lowest, is that because there isn't any maintenance being figured in for that's owned by the state? Is it just for?
The state maintains their core and does not put that cost today back on anybody that joins them. So in some ways, that is a cost savings by doing that alternate solution versus the standalone. Because in the standalone, you'd have to maintain your own cores, and there's a heavy cost with that. The state owns those, the state's maintaining those, and they're not charging the users for that. So you're really maintaining 3 primary sites in the county, and then the other sites of the state are providing the coverage on the borders of your county. Therefore, you would anticipate that cost to be cheaper.
Is the state maintaining theirs at an acceptable level, I guess would be a question, and do we have any control over that?
You really don't have any control over it other than a user. You know, I mean, they're maintaining it to a public safety user, KHP, and other users on the system. We've asked that as well. I don't always, they don't want to give an answer. I'm just going to be straightforward.
Do you have any guarantees when you join into the state system that in 5 years they will say, we're too full, or we don't have room for you, or they could just boot you out? Do you have any contractual thing or any guarantees that once you sign up on that system, you'll always be part of that system?
Yeah, you're gonna marry them at the point you sign up for it. I always, as part of this process, if the decision's made to join the state, this body's got to sit there and make an MOU or some intergovernmental agreement to be a part of the state. And there'll be rules in there, as well as I call it a divorce rule. If you ever had to leave and go on your own, that you would always have an exit clause in those levels of MOUs. I've never seen, in my experience of doing regional systems, I've never seen anybody have to do one of those, but you still put it in to protect yourself.
I would presume that since the state does not now allocate that maintenance cost, that does not prevent them from doing so tomorrow or next year.
Absolutely. Yep, that's.
So that $3,800,000 number is pretty solid.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Very fair assessment.
I just look at it as under the cons when they talk about the due to the state system technical limitations, and then right below that when they don't guarantee their part maintenance for 15 years. That kind of goes hand in hand where, you know, they're just saying, hey, our equipment is getting to be older, we're not going to guarantee it for 15 more years.
The technology that they're at on their base stations is a GTR 8000. It's not end of life, so I don't have a whole lot of concerns with that. Their IT infrastructure, which is their cores, they've done an SUA, so they've been keeping it updated, and they continue to do that. So I don't have concerns with that, per se, on the technology piece in itself.
Okay.
So how many outside users are on the state system now?
I don't have the answer. I don't know. I've named a few counties that I know are a part of that. Typically, they would be looking at doing like you're doing. You got to have coverage in Saline County. You got to have coverage in Salina. The state system gives mobile coverage throughout the state. So you were looking at 3 sites in addition to the state sites to supplement that coverage around the city of Salina and Saline County. And there's channel capacity that will allow your users to be on it as well as the state users. But they could add more users. I mean, again, that gets into the MOU that you would have to do with the state to be a part of that network. And like I said, a lot of other counties have done that, Leavenworth, Butler, Harvey, Ford, to name a few. There's others, Miami counties, and that's a TUSA project, and we're in the middle of tying Miami County to the state.
So under the standalones, again, this from lack of knowledge, this would allow the city, the police to also talk directly to the county sheriff, EMTs, also highway patrol. Or not?
So the difference between the standalone part of it and then the Motorola alternate system joining with the state, all of these systems or all of these proposals have that interoperability capability regardless. But yes, the standalone piece of it, when we talk standalone system, it just means Saline County, the city of Salina, that's our system. KHP doesn't use it, KDOT doesn't use it, it's ours. We own it. The alternate proposals that we got from both Harris, the L3 Harris and Motorola, but we did not had say that the alternate proposal with the L3 was not compliant. So the alternate solution by Motorola is actually joining the state system. And what that means is, yes, we'll have some towers here in Saline County that are Saline Counties or the city of Salinas, but we will also use the towers that are owned by the state. So more of a joint collaboration with the state. Does that help answer your question?
But you can still talk to the same, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I was getting at.
Yep,
With-
absolutely.
And standalone, we're not leaving anybody out as far as highway patrol or whatever.
No, it would just be a little bit of a different process, but we could still have that there.
I'm assuming the state, if a county has its own system, the state gains access to that with some form of understanding. I would assume it enhances their local coverage.
Correct. So, and that's kind of the with the Motorola alternate solution of joining the state system, is it beneficial for Saline County? Yes. Is it beneficial for the state and the highway patrol? Yes, absolutely. Again, that's that collaboration.
If we had our own standalone system, would the state still be able to access it?
If we allowed them permission to do so, yes. So again, if we had just our own system and it was just ours, we'd go back to the same thing as we would have to have a memorandum of understanding with the state for us to use their system, and vice versa. They would have to have a memorandum of understanding with us to be able to use our stuff.
Yeah, I haven't sat here and made a chart, but equipment-wise, it seems like the standalone system is better. I keep getting bothered by this statement that the L3 Harris system is lacking in true interoperability with the state. To what extent can you patch that divide?
So the ISSI would be your direct IP connection to do that, and allows for that. Again, there's a cost in there on your side as well as the state side. Or you can do what they call an RF gateway that would allow you to monitor state resources, or whichever ones. There's a regional plan that Kansas uses, so those are in everybody's radio regardless of whether they're standalone or part of the state or whatever. ISSI would give you the direct connection, or some type of RF gateway would give you that level of interoperability.
And that would be seamless in the field. We wouldn't have to stand there and wait 20 seconds for it to.
ISSI should be seamless, and then obviously being part of the state would be seamless. The RF gateway may be what I call user roam or fingertip roam.
And is that, and I'm losing the acronyms as quickly as you give them to me, but the ISSI, is that cost included in this chart on page 4?
It is in your side of it. It's not the state side of it. That cost is not there. That would be, again, at the direction we get from staff, and this body would be, trying to negotiate that if that's a critical piece of this network.
So what you're saying is that the state will incur a cost. Will we be responsible for that cost?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So that's not a part of the Harris solution at this
Well, the ISSI on their side of it is, it's not on the Motorola state side. That would be the additional cost.
Okay.
Is that a whole lot of money or a little bit of money?
You know, and that's, pardon my frustration, I've seen it anywhere from 250,000 to 2 million on, when we have to deal with Motorola in this way, and I don't like it, so I'll say that openly.
That's just for the ISSI?
On one side. That's not both sides, because one side, again, it's already here in this price for your side, it's not there for the other side. Other than the alternate solution, you don't need it in the alternate solution.
200,000 is, 2 million. I'm gonna-
Oh, yeah,
A little bit.
it's a sore subject, yes, sir.
If I might return something to I think it was an answer you gave to Commissioner Davis, is you said that at some point, if we had a user out at the fringes somewhere and they were in the middle of an incident, they may have to remember to do something different to connect. Which system does that occur with? I was not clear if we had the L3 standalone, if that would be the case, or if we had the alternate solution, that would be the case.
Either standalones, that would be the case if you don't have ISSI connected to the state.
Okay, so it applies to the standalone, but if we were on the Motorola alternate, that situation would not occur.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And this might sound like and maybe it's addressed in there. You know, what do the people who are going to be using this system, what are their preferences?
Well, I guess that is the beauty of the room of audience that I have behind me. We have got all of the members from the 911 Advisory Committee that have been in this process and been in the trenches with us since the day one. I also have members of our rural fire districts, and then, of course, other members of just some of those that have been along in this journey. I mean, I would certainly venture to say that all of them have been informed of this whole entire process. When we talk specifically about moving forward, the 911 committee did meet. We got the same information that you guys have in front of you. We were faced with the same type of question that TUSA was posed with of what are the next steps? In our discussions as a 911 committee, we did come to the conclusion that we did feel that moving forward with negotiations with both L3 Harris for a standalone system and negotiations with Motorola for joining the state system were our best options. That is what we had discussed with TUSA. They had actually made that recommendation to us before we started our conversation, so that's kind of where we're at. As far as what is best and which, I mean, every individual of our 911 committee has different preferences as to which system they'd like to see, but when it comes down to the grading of the request for proposals and the technical compliance that it had and how closely the scores were, that is where we landed, as that dual negotiations is appropriate.
Okay, so essentially you're saying that from a user standpoint and any technical procedural difficulties that might occur, it's kind of a tie.
Absolutely.
From the standpoint of the user. Okay.
Absolutely. There's pros and cons, and we are all aware of those. We've been very well informed of what those might be. But regardless, I think at the end of the day, all of our public safety agencies have expressed a very great need and desire to do something with our antiquated system. We have got to do something. Because at this point in time, there are so many areas just even in Saline County that you can't even talk to each other, let alone going outside of our county.
Can either of these proposals solve all of the current problems? Because no matter what the cost, if it doesn't work, no
Absolutely.
point
So
buying it, yeah.
Absolutely. So that was one of the biggest thing. Again, Commissioner Weiss had asked as far as the compliance with coverage, and when we said we needed 96% coverage, and these proposals all met that or exceeded that, that solves probably 99% of the problems that we have currently. The rest of it is just ease of the system, reuse of the system, which comes some education on that part.
I just wish all these guys weren't looking down while you said that. Looking for some eye contact. Are there any major concerns with either, concerns that might be addressable that need to be known before you start negotiating?
That was one of the things that we did discuss in our committee meetings, because there are concerns with all three proposals. There most certainly is, but that was our job to talk to TUSA and with their recommendation. And they guided us very well as to the things that could be negotiated or the things that can be clarified. And I've got complete faith in TUSA's ability to help us work through those issues.
What do we look like? What does what does the rest of this process look like in terms of a timeline? You said you were gonna, looking for direction to enter negotiations with both L3 and the Motorola alternate. How long do you expect that process to take?
That really shouldn't take more than a month, and probably scheduling is probably the bigger driver than the actual process. We said in this document we would give the vendor no more than 2 days. If they can't come in and take care of our needs and I won't say demands, but what we need to negotiate, then there isn't no need to spend any more time. So once we get past that, we would come back to this body as well with a recommendation based on the contract negotiations. And upon approval and a notice to proceed, you're probably looking at 18 months to 2 years to actually then deploy and have the system ready for the public safety users to cut over.
Perhaps, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but when you say that there's actually a tie, I mean, on page 5 it says there's actually a tie in the contract between the two, yet on page 4 it's $1.5 million difference. How is that a tie?
So the scoring is not done by the price. The scoring is done by, if you go to page 2, sir, it's done by the technical score as well as the price, and in this case as well as the oral presentation. So we're all within a half a point of each other, and then the alternate and the Harris standalone gets even tighter. So that's the true score based on a technical compliance score and a cost score. Now, if we go to a dual negotiation at your direction, we will look at, it'll be the bottom line at that point, will be the deciding factor.
Because the technical scores are so close.
Yes, sir.
Does all these prices here include the radios themselves?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you look at page 4, the subscribers, so you see infrastructure and engineering, that's the system, and then the subscribers and putting the subscribers in service, that's that respective cost.
Thank you.
I presume, maybe that's a mistake, but I presume that in your negotiations, when you're through with that, we will know what it's going to cost us to get the state upgraded to interface with the Harris standalone.
We would, and we'll see the other vendors' willingness to do that if it ends up being a Harris recommendation.
Okay. Because as Chairman Vidrickson said, it's already $1.5 million difference, and if you add another $2 million to that to upgrade the state system, we're talking, some real money.
Right. Now, let's walk through the scenario, I think, just from the questions I've heard from the commissioners and the city council.
Let me clarify one thing that was said here about, I thought the radios were gonna be back on the individual departments. And it'd be up to them to determine what type of radios they wanted, how many they wanted. I didn't think that was gonna be part of the proposal.
Right, you're correct. But we needed to know what that cost is. In order for us, it has to be an all package deal, but that is the intent, is that then the cost for the actual individual radios for the different departments, such as the rural fire department, the sheriff's office, those would be broke down specifically for each department. What we didn't want to happen was for Fire District number 7 to go out and buy radios at $50 a piece, but District 1 go out and have to buy the same radios for $100 a piece. We needed the prices to be consistent.
But if we back Salina Fire Department out of what, out of the price, that would be on them, and the rural fire departments would be on them, and our sheriff's department would be on us. I mean, I don't see how that adds up here.
So a couple things. We put the subscribers as the total package because that allows the vendor that's selling you infrastructure and subscribers to give you deeper discounts. However, we've got the details on those subscribers that break them out by agency, and how you bill back within the county is your own internal process.
Okay, I follow that.
So let's walk through a scenario, if I may. Let's just say we go through all the negotiations and the Motorola alternate ends up being the one, and we sign an MOU and everything's happy and everybody's working, and 5 years from now the divorce occurs. What's the cost involved in that? At that point, you're looking at adding a core. So today I'd sit there and say that'd be $1 million. You're looking then at maintaining that core for additional 10 years. That could easily be a couple $100,000 a year. Additional cost if that divorce happened. So everything else would stay the same, the rest of your system's in order, but those would be additional costs if for some reason you decided to leave the state, or the state decided to do something that was Saline County and the city of Salina was not in agreement with. So I just want to put that out there for you guys, so you got full information as you're making your informed decisions. Yes, sir?
Would the radios we'd be buying be capable of the phase 2 upgrade?
We want a phase 2 out of the chute. They'll actually do phase 1 and phase 2. Correct. We're not going to kick you back a level of technology because somebody else doesn't want to go there today.
So whenever the state upgrades to phase 2, that'll be another seamless transformation.
Yeah, you'd already be
You
there.
would already have that, but there's no problem with our being at phase 2 still interacting with a phase 1 system.
Correct.
It's able to be retroactive.
If you go to Dickinson County, your radio's going to go to a phase 1 mode. That's all seamless.
Okay.
This might not be even relevant right now, but how that interagency would work, if you had Highway Patrol, the sheriff, and Salina PD in need of conversation, is there just a channel they go to, or are they roaming those channels, or?
Today, if you had a P25 radio, they're going to switch to a regional talk group, or they would, if the state allowed them to be on their primary dispatch group, they would just switch to it and talk on the state system.
But someone has to initiate that. Would that be dispatch telling everyone to go to a regional, or?
Yes. Or some interop talk group that would allow everybody to come onto one talk group. Give you an example in Kansas City region with the bi-state, if for some reason a pursuit incurs, the agency that starts that pursuit patches that talk group to a interop talk group. They call it ReachCom 3 or pursuit. At that point, everybody that's scanning that or listening to that can now listen and participate in that pursuit. That's probably the most common one that would kick up between sheriff, city of Salina police, and the state highway patrol. So you're going to have some level of standard operating procedure that's going to allow that. From the fire side, if people remember the big Overland Park apartment fire that occurred, that happened on ReachCom 7, that every hook and ladder that came from the whole metropolitan region went to that regional common to sit there and support that big event. So a lot of that is operational that would be determined with the state of how you're going to handle those specific situations. And you probably have something similar to that today, but it's a lot more difficult to do.
More questions? So I guess we look at you, Hannah, for direction on what you need from us as the governing bodies.
I don't know that we need motions and votes today, but I think if we get consensus out of the bodies that we're okay to proceed in the direction of dual negotiations, that's probably sufficient for moving forward and then coming back to the bodies. If you don't agree with that direction, then might be nice to formalize that a little bit.
I guess I would look at my commissioners and basically it sounds like the 911 committee was looking at the L3 Harris standalone and the Motorola's alternate. I would guess that would we have consensus to go that direction for negotiations with those two?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want the city involved, but everything in here only alludes to Saline County.
That is correct. Again, part of the history piece of this is obviously with the city being heavy users of any type of radio system, and then the county as well. We did release the request for proposals strictly from Saline County. But we have always wanted to be able to have that conversation and that communication with the city, since anything that we decided on the county level certainly affects the city as well.
If we go forward with the same basic proposal as, guidance that they've given you, when it comes time to select one, is that a 10-person vote then, or how does that work?
So I think we'll have to go back to each body separately because, as you alluded to earlier, Mr. Chairman, there are separate costs for each of the agencies. And so each body would have to evaluate those costs. Yeah, that's kind of why we wanted to have a joint discussion first, because the next iteration of this will be breaking it down and saying, okay, here's what we came to with the person or the entity that we all agree is the best. This is your share, this is your share.
Well, with that question, I probably put the cart before the horse, but my feeling, and I'll ask my other commissioners this, but my feeling is to piggyback onto the same proposal that they just gave to as far as the negotiation goes. So I would look for a consensus from my board.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're on board with what they have indicated they'd like to do, go forward with.
Chairman Dickerson, it does kind of beg the question though. I mean, when we come down to it, I guess you'll come back to us with one single recommendation, correct? From those two. So it won't be like the county is sitting there looking at L3 and Motorola, and then we're sitting here looking at L3 and Motorola, and each body picks a different option because one may be less expensive for the city versus the county. So when you all present, you will have a single recommendation.
That is correct, and
So
one that
we'll be
is,
evaluating the two proposals at that point. It'll just be-
that is correct.
And the conversations have been that way to date. I mean, Salina PD operates dispatch, and so that's an area of interest and concern for us, as well as the radios that we use for fire, PD, and EMS. So, well, we definitely want to be coordinated.
I'll just ask the question, which I'm assuming is on somebody else's mind. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this would be a county-owned system? Yeah, and how we decide to portion costs would have to be, obviously our radios and anything that should meet our city operations would have to be responsible for.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll let Mike chime in as well because we had the same discussion. You bring up a very good point. That is something that is going to involve a little bit more discussion and a little bit more coordination moving forward. That is what has been discussed in the past, was looking at the county taking care of infrastructure the individual agencies taking care of radios, and then the city covering, whatever costs that they would have for the dispatch system, as well as, radio costs as well. Does that cover it, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. Commissioners, you may recall that we identified a budget number, but at the time, I tried to be very mindful of saying the county's been gracious, or county staff has been gracious in talking about some allocation, but I did not want to commit them to that until we got through this process and we knew kind of a cost allocation. Just don't know what that number will be yet.
Well, the purpose of this meeting is to determine exactly, to go forward with the negotiations. The other part of it that we're talking about comes, that's when we put our boxing gloves back on, I guess.
Right,
Remember, keep in mind, we just settled the expo.
Well, I'm gonna give it another 5 years.
Well, we would prefer not another 5 years. But yeah, you make a very, very, very good point. I will tell you, we are not the only county that is going through this. We are not the only county that has had the same type of situation, dealing with municipalities and county and trying to figure out how to best divide costs. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. I've got plenty of examples that are out there to see some of those best practices. And we'll have to look into that a lot on the staff level.
Well, personally, I think down the line, this is going to, we're in the same boat. This is going to affect 100% of the people in Saline County. It's mandatory that we do it, and I look at this as being a much easier task to decide who pays for what than what the previous negotiation we've had with the two bodies.
I would hope so.
And do you want to double down on the debt, Brent? So anyway, I look forward to that, and we'll let you guys come up with that part of it, and then we'll go from there.
Chairman, you made a good point that I don't think we touched on today, and it is mandatory. I don't think we talked about the narrow banding. In addition to the outdated technology, you might touch on what we're up against that necessitates this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can remember, again, this has been a multi-year process that we've been involved with this, but one of the things that really, really, really hindered our ability to have good radio communications and be able to communicate with one another with our current system happened back in 2012 when the feds came down and that required us to narrowband. With that, we lost a significant amount of the coverage that we had. So that's what kind of really started driving a lot of this train in the very beginning. We have heard rumors that the FCC is also planning on mandating another narrowband in the future. I think there's been a lot of pushback on that because, again, we're not the only county or city in this United States that has had issues with the first round of narrowbanding. But we don't know what that looks like, and we don't know if it's going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 1 year. We have not heard anything, but we fully well know that the federal mandate piece of it, or the potential of another federal mandate to narrowband, plus the coupling with our already aging infrastructure and antiquated infrastructure, we've got to do something. But absolutely the federal mandates that could possibly be coming down would absolutely cripple our communications capabilities here.
I think the first responders can go home and sleep tonight, that all 10 commissioners are in agreement that this is mandatory, we got to do this for the safety and for the public and for those of you that are on the front line. So this is going to get done, but it'll be up to us then to decide how we do it. So.
The only thing Commissioner Davis, you asked, is it a city-owned, county-owned deal? I've been in this since 1997 in the radio end of it. It started out that the county had their own frequency, the police had their own frequency, and we didn't talk to each other. And we finally got that all joined together, and how has it been done? It's been done with joint funds through the 911 tax. So who really funded everything where we're at today? 911 was able to buy those Master 3 repeaters and page extenders and all that stuff. But this is beyond anything that 911 will ever be able to pay. And those Master 3s, they're at end of life. They're done.
24 months.
Great, do we get 24 months?
Well, I certainly think that we have our direction. Dean, are you good with this direction too?
Yeah, I guess I would request, from everybody here, can we go ahead and get this negotiation done this month and come back to this board sometime in September with the recommendation? I'm at least throwing it out there, trying to get it moving, so.
Let's do it. Put the whip to it.
One question, if you do go with the joining into the state, is it still a 2-year, or can you get that up and running and just add those others on? Is it still that long a process?
It wouldn't be unreasonable to probably, if we join the state, to do it in lesser time.
Significant less?
Well, I'm gonna give an example. Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, similar to how you guys operate here. Their radio system was in dire straits. I don't think yours is in dire straits. But because it was, they literally wanted their system built in a year, and we had that as part of negotiations and actually part of the RFP. So if we want to escalate this, we'll have that pre-discussion with everybody before, and we'll make that a part of negotiations.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the conversation. We appreciate your questions. We have the direction moving forward, and that's exactly what we will do. And we will be back at the table again, hopefully soon.
Okay, with that, I believe we're done, so I would ask for a motion to adjourn the Salina City Commission special meeting.
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting also, Saline County Commissioners. Moved and seconded, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, we're adjourned.